We are going to cover chapter 14, and that is about abnormality. It's our last chapter. Whoop whoop. We are just about done, and it's my favorite chapter. It is the chapter that I have in my master's degree in. So everything in this chapter is what I spent 2 years full-time studying. So it's kind of hard to know what to include and what to leave out because we only have, one day to cover this? So I don't want to include too much, which is hard for me because, this is my thing. This is what I do. This is what I got a degree in. So it's a lot more than just one class period, one chapter. But I went through and I tried to pick out some of the highlights. So I did what makes something abnormal, which is a good question that everybody wants answered, and we don't really have answers, but we do tell you what criteria we use to decide that, given our limitations and, human brain. The other thing that we cover is the causes of mental disorders, because they go back to the theories that we've been talking about the entire semester. General psych is all about kind of establishing these theories, these basic foundation theories. When you take some other psychology classes, they're on a specific topic, and they'll go back and evaluate that topic based on these foundation theories. So, first intro to anything is the basics of it. So we do the causes of abnormality, and then we do the treatment for abnormality, which is going to match the cause, because if we think the reason you're depressed is because of a biological chemical imbalance, then we're going to treat it with a biological chemical treatment. So it only makes sense that the cause and the treatment go together. And again, those are just going to be the theories that we've already covered, just applied to abnormality. Then the last little section, I think there's a little bit about forensic psych. And then there's a little bit about the major disorders that's the most common. Goodness gracious. You want to know more about disorders, take abnormal psych here at Nash. And some of you have to, I think, for your degrees. If you're human service, you have to. And you might just take it as an elective because it's interesting. It's what most people think of when they think of psychology. They think of treatment, therapy, abnormality, disorders, that kind of stuff. So there's a little bit about the most popular common disorders, just to give you some sort of information about those. And I think that's basically it. So question number 1, what criteria do we use to determine abnormality? That's a hard one. I'm glad I didn't have to come up with it. If you think about it, do you want just one person to make that decision? No. So lots of people work together in the field, and it can be psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, psychiatric nurses. They all work together to try to answer this and give some sort of definition. And it is hard, and it's always changing. What we may define as abnormal one decade, the next decade we change our mind. We might add something new or take it away out of the abnormal category. We decide now it's normal. Homosexuality used to be an abnormality according to psychology, and now it's not. So things come and go. And a lot of what defines abnormality is what's going on currently in society. So over time, over history, you'll see different things come into the abnormal category and out of. We're just kind of taking a measurement of what current society is. So culture matters, and that's number 6, but we're not there yet. So number 1, what criteria do we use? And your book gives you a list. Subjective distress, and then we go on to describe that. Maladaptive, statistical rarity, deviance from social norms. So we're going to go and spend time the next couple questions looking at what each of those things mean. But those are the criteria that we use. If your behavior, your thoughts, or your feelings meet one of these criteria, then it could be considered abnormal. What you find is a lot of abnormalities on a continuum with normal. So if you do some of this, some of the time it's okay. It's considered normal. But if you do it more frequently than most people, it's considered abnormal. Or if you do it, more intensely than some people, it's abnormal. So it's a fine line. There are some things that is just about the frequency or intensity that crosses it over. So you're going to look at these and go, I do that, I have that. Most of us do not. Most of us do not have these problems. And it often takes quite a bit of these symptoms to say that now we're in the abnormal category. So they try to protect everybody from being classified as abnormal, or else then there is no abnormal, right? So let's take a look at these different criteria in particular. Number 2 is about statistical deviance. So that's the idea that if you don't do it very often, if it doesn't happen very often in life, that people aren't commonly acting this way, thinking this way, or feeling this way, then we're going to call your expression of that abnormal. So this is one of the ones where we go out and see what is most commonly going on. And if it's a common behavior, thought, or feeling, then we're not going to call it abnormal based on this criteria alone. So it's about what is statistically rare. And this can be like, what you might call good behaviors, thoughts, and feelings, not just bad behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. If you can read an entire book in an hour, a big book, that's statistically rare. Most people can't do that. If you have incredible musical, piano talent at 6, that's not common. So that would be considered abnormal. So it's just about what's statistically uncommon, whether good or bad, whether helpful or unhelpful, it's still going to be considered abnormal. So maybe you have some talents or abilities that make you abnormal. You wouldn't consider them bad. They're helpful, but we would consider them unusual, just not common. It's abnormal. Number 3, example of subjective distress. So subjective distress is just what it sounds like. You are unhappy, okay? You're unhappy with your behavior, your thought, or your feelings, or it's causing you problems in your life. You're getting in trouble with the law, you're having relationship problems because of it, you're losing jobs, you're not meeting the goals that you set for yourself. So, that's maladaptive, I'm sorry. You don't feel good. It's more of the emotional part of it. You are upset, you're anxious, you're angry, you're frustrated. It's about your feelings about the situation and about what you're doing. So some feelings are normal. It's normal right now to be angry and frustrated with the virus shutdown. It's normal to be a little nervous about it. It's normal to be upset or worried about a test, some test anxiety. So it's normal to have bad feelings or upsetting, distressful feelings. That's, again, one of those continuum things where it just depends on how frequently you're feeling this way or how intensely you're feeling this way. But if you're having stress or worry or fear or anxiety or anger or depression, then we're probably going to call whatever you're doing that causes that abnormal. Okay, or those feelings abnormal. Again, it's on the line with continuum, normal. Number 4, inability to function normally or maladaptive. So that's what I was actually describing a few seconds ago, and that is you're not meeting your obligations in life. You're not, doing what you're supposed to as an employee. You're not taking care of your kids. You're not following the law. So it's getting in the way of your life. Whatever you're thinking, feeling, and doing, it's getting in the way. Someone who has to count to 30 every time they touch a doorknob, that's probably going to take some time out of their day and get in the way of what they're needing to do. Someone who can't leave their house because they're so worried, they're so stressed, they're so anxious. Now they can't work, they can't go to the grocery store, they're dependent on others. That's going to be a problem. You're having problems with your spouse, legal system because of your behavior. That's maladaptive. And then number 5, deviance from social norms. That's kind of similar to statistical rarity, except usually this is not going to have a good possibility to it. If you deviate from what is culturally expected, and that's where that cultural stuff comes in, then we're probably going to call your behavior abnormal. That's why we need to know the culture of the person that we're working with. If it's common in their society and their religion to hear their dead family members talk to them, then that if they're experiencing that, it wouldn't necessarily be considered abnormal. Now, it can still be considered abnormal, even if their culture or their religion believes in it, if they're experiencing it outside the bounds and the rules of that culture or religious belief, okay? So even within that religion or society, there are rules about how you're supposed to, when you're going to likely to be contacted or communicated with the deceased family members. If you're violating those rules, then we can still consider it abnormal. But this is why you need to know the belief system of the people that you work with. You can't apply your own beliefs, your own experiences, your own attitudes. Okay? And that is number 6. We've already answered it a couple times, is defining abnormality culturally based. Yes, yes, yes. So different groups of people are going to have different definitions of what is normal or abnormal. Again, you go to another part of the world, you've got to know what is common there, what is believed, how people behave, and that goes along with statistical norm, what's the norm, what do we see most commonly. But it can, even in the United States, if I'm going to work with a population that has specific beliefs or religion or whatever, then I need to know what those are, or I can't work with that group because I'm going to apply my own. Number 7. So now we're starting into what are the causes of these abnormalities. And what you're going to find is there's no set answer. Okay? Psychology is full of possibilities, but no absolute 100% truths. So it can be either frustrating or intriguing to you. I used to find it very intriguing. Now I find it a little frustrating, but oh well. So number 7, we're just going back through the theories that we talked about with chapter 1, is the biological theory. So it's saying the reason people are behaving, thinking, and feeling abnormally is because of something going on in their body. It's biologically based. It's their brain, it's their nervous system we talked about before. It's the endocrine system, which is hormones. It's neurotransmitters. It's something about their brain, their body functioning. Maybe their thyroid's messed up. It can be something, not related to the nervous system. But it's pretty easy, right? Number 8, what does the cognitive model say? Well, remember, cognitive means your thoughts. So this one is saying the reason that you're feeling depressed is because you're thinking depressed thoughts. It's your thought patterns that are causing you these problems and to behave the way you are. You get so angry and you lash out at your boss or whoever because of the thoughts going through your head. So we need to fix your thoughts. Number 9, what does the psychodynamic model say? This is the childhood stuff. Remember, we spent the whole chapter 13 basically on Freud and the psychodynamic theory. So it says your childhood, something happened in your childhood to make you the way you are today. Remember those psychosexual stages, oral, anal, phallic, latency, genital? That's the cause. Okay, so we're going to go back to that somehow. The id, superego battle. Remember those defense mechanisms, any of that stuff. The unconscious, things are going on unconsciously. Okay? All right. All those things. Conditional positive regard, that doesn't go in there. I gotta get rid of that. Boink. All right. Birth order does. The behavioral model, number 10. The behavioral model says that it's learned. It's the whole chapter 6 on classical and operant conditioning. Behavioral model or theory is the same as the learning theory. It says that you start off as a blank slate. Everything you become is a sole consequence of the experiences that you've had that shaped and molded you. So if you have abnormal behaviors, thoughts, or feelings, it's because of the experiences that you have. You've learned to be abnormal. Maybe you've observational learning. You watched other people around you be abnormal. Maybe you've been rewarded for being abnormal, operant conditioning with attention or getting out of job duties, responsibilities. Or maybe it's been classically conditioned into you. You're reacting depressed because this is the time of year that you had a loss in your family. And so when that time of year comes up, you feel depressed again. Well, it's because you're connecting the time of year with that experience. So it's just saying it's learned somehow. Number 11, sociocultural. So this one says that where you live, where you grew up, and your position in that society will make you abnormal. If you live in an area that has a lot of war and fighting going on, then you might be depressed. And if you're depressed or anxious, and you might do abnormal things, but it would be because of the times and the place that you're living in, what's going on in society. If you are, live in a culture and you're a minority and you have no power, that's stressful. But the reason you're experiencing the stress, the anxiety, abnormal behavior is because of your position in society and what you can't do, your lack of control and power. So, that's what we said when we said it's called culturally bound anyway. Number 12. All right, now we switch over and we do the exact same thing that we just did with the causes. We use the same theories, but now we apply them to the treatment. Makes sense. So like if you skip down, I should have done them in order, but number 12. Oh, oops. Back it up. Number 12 is kind of asking us for a little bit before we get to the treatment. Number 12, how do we know that what the cause of the particular disorder is? So we looked at a couple different theories of causes. How do we know which one's right? We don't. That's the point. We don't know which one's right. So there's not a one pat answer. What we do is talk to the person and try to figure out all the situation around their abnormal behavior. When did it start? How long has it been going? Tell me the situation. What are you experiencing? All that kind of stuff. So then we can try to get an idea of whether there's nothing going on in their life that could cause this and they have this in their family, then it could be biological. Or maybe it's the situation they're in, a bad relationship, or maybe they just lost their job, or there's all kinds of things that we have to evaluate for this person to help figure out why they're experiencing these things. So number 13, okay, how does knowing the cause have anything to do with knowing how to treat it? Well, we already told us. It gives us direction to go in. It gives us some idea of where to start. Since there is no absolute 100% prescribed, gonna work every time solution to people's problems, we've got to tease out the details and then apply what solution we think might help this particular person in this situation. Number 14. Okay, now we're starting to use those theories that we just looked at to try to understand how to help somebody or fix somebody's problems. All right. So number 14, how would you treat someone with depression if you believe in the cognitive theory? Remember, cognitive says thoughts. So how do we treat them? Well, we have to examine their thoughts. We have to have them take a look at what they're thinking when they're behaving in this abnormal way and see if we can adjust their thinking pattern to something that's probably more realistic, less extreme, less faulty, less wrong. So we want to look at what you're thinking. Number 15, how would you treat someone with depression if you believe in the biological theory? If you think it's biologically caused, you're gonna fix it with the same method. So medication, surgery, something like this, something biological. Number 16, how would you treat someone with depression if you believe in the psychodynamic theory? Well, we're gonna have to talk about your childhood. We're going to have to dig deep into that unconscious, try to figure out what's going on below the surface that you don't know anything about. Evaluate your dreams. We like dreams. So it's something that happened during those psychosexual stages. All that kind of stuff. It's going to go back to your mother somehow. Number 16, how would you treat someone with depression if you... we already did that one. Number 17, how would you treat someone with depression if you believe in the behavioral theory? That's that behavioral learning theory. Well, if you learn to be depressed, then you need to unlearn depression, right? If you get out of chores because you're depressed or you get a lot of attention, then we need to change those things. We need to hold your tushy to the line. Even if you're depressed, you still got to do these things. If you're depressed because you're around depressed people, you need to get away from them. Okay? It's about looking at the rewards you're getting. Maybe classical conditioning, the reminders that are triggering the depression. And then, of course, observational learning, get you away from anyone else who's depressed. So if you learned it, you got to unlearn it. Number 18, how would you treat someone with depression if you believe in the sociocultural theory? So this is all about, again, your position in society and the beliefs of the people around you. So if you have no power, maybe we need to figure out, is there a way for you to get some more power? How can you manage this setting and scene so that you can change your position. Maybe you need to move. Maybe you need to live somewhere else. A lot of people live in bad areas and they decide that they don't want to live there anymore, so they move. They think that's the source of their problem. So, number 19. All right, so that's it. All right, that was the treatment that went with the cause. So number 19 is the book that we use. What is the DSM? This is the Psychologist's Bible. This has all the disorders that we recognize in the United States. And it stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It gives us the criteria and the statistical information, like is it more common in guys, girls, what age, what's going to happen in the future for these people, like what's the typical course of the disorder. Number 20, psychologists use this book to diagnose. It's got a checklist. You meet this checklist of symptoms, you've got this diagnosis. And then we send it off to insurance so they'll pay. Number 21, who wrote the DSM? Lots of people wrote the DSM. The American Psychological Association, they pick different people, and we listed who those people are: psychiatric nurses, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers. They pick these people who are experts in the field, and they put them into committees, and these committees research those particular group of disorders for like 10 years. They see what comes out from other people doing research on the topic, and they gather all that information, and then they make their recommendations. Does this disorder stay in the book? Does it get kicked out? Does it get renamed? Do we change the symptoms? Do we change the criteria? That committee comes back and reports, and then those changes are made. So it is a living, breathing thing written by lots of people, and it's based on what's happening right now in the world. So that's why this book is always changing. Attitudes, behaviors change over time. We accept some things and we start to not accept others. Number 22, what is not included in the DSM? Treatment. It tells you nothing about what kinds of treatment are possible. Could you imagine how big that book would be if it did? Whew. I mean, we just went through 4 or 5 theories. You'd have to explore each single one of them for every single disorder. That would be a huge book. That would be ridiculous. So no, there's no treatment book. There's no one book that tells us how to treat depression. There are tons of books about how to treat depression biologically. Tons of books about how to treat depression with cognitive methods. Tons of books about how to treat depression with the psychodynamic theory. But to put all of that into one, maybe those funny cartoon books that you can barely open. Nope, ain't gonna happen. All right, number 23. Now we're doing a little bit of what are some common disorders that you would most likely see out there in the world. You know, the least common ones are the fun ones. So sorry for bringing up the boring ones, but it just makes sense if you just got a little bit of time, cover the highlights. So one of the most common groups of disorders are anxiety disorders. There are 5, but that number changes, like I said, in the DSM every time a new one comes out. So phobias, very common. You've heard the word phobia before. This is an intense, irrational fear of something. It's intense. It will interfere with your life. Remember those criteria. It will cause you distress, all that kind of stuff. And it is irrational. You know that the fear you have of this, whatever, spiders, snakes, water, closed spaces, heights, is disproportionate to the actual threat. Okay, and you know it's extreme, right? But you can't stop it. That's a phobia. Now there's different kinds of phobias. Specific phobia is the most common diagnosis, and that is just something in particular, like spiders, snakes, heights, water, closed spaces, flying, that kind of thing. It's a specific issue, a specific thing that triggers your fear. It's still intense and irrational, but specific. Then we have social phobia. Social phobia is just what it sounds like. It's an intense irrational fear, because that's what a phobia is, of social situations. And it can be where you're going to be evaluated. So giving a speech, talking around a group of people. It's being judged in social settings. So you avoid any social situation where you could be judged. You're fine with just one-on-one, but if you are, or an interview might be scary, obviously, because it's judged, even though it could be one-on-one. But if it's you and your friend, you're fine. If it's you giving a speech, you're not. Again, remember how we said continuum? Most people are nervous giving a speech. But if you don't complete your degree because you can't do your COM 231 public speaking class, that's different. Now we're really starting to interfere with your goals. If the fear and anxiety you experience is debilitating, you can't even go in that day, you're sick all night, that's extreme. Okay. So those are two kinds of specific phobia, or two kinds of phobias, two categories. We also have generalized anxiety disorder, and that is where you just feel anxious. It's often called free-floating anxiety. You're just an uptight, anxious person. You'll worry about a number of things. Bring it up, I'll worry about it. A worrywart. It's not tied to anything specific like a phobia is. Those are the only ones I listed. We have obsessive compulsive disorder. I don't know why I don't have that listed. That is the, like you've heard of it before. Obsessions are thoughts that keep popping into your head and you can't seem to control it. It's very intrusive. And compulsions are behaviors. Often the behaviors you do to try to remedy the anxiety from the thoughts. It kind of fixes thoughts or corrects thoughts. It seems to control it for people. And it can make sense. If your obsessive thought is that you left the stove on, then you go back and check it 15 times. That makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes your obsessive idea is that something bad's going to happen to your mom, and your compulsive behavior to remedy that is to count the steps that you take when you go up steps. That doesn't make any sense. That's not going to protect her, but that alleviates your anxiety. You can your compulsive behavior can be anything that helped you feel better. So, it's learned in that respect. I don't know why I don't have that on the notes or on the Type Study Guide answers. What's another one? Because now I'm just doing it from my memory. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. That's a disorder where you've had a traumatic experience and then your reaction to it is abnormal. It's very common to have a very high stress response to a situation that was scary, like a car wreck or a victim of a crime or something, or saw something bad happen. It's very expected for a while for you to be like on guard and nervous and uptight and can't sleep and have nightmares, and that's would be called normal. But this is when it goes on for like 6 months, okay? It interferes with your life. We would call this abnormal. So again, some of this is just time frame and how intense it is. So there's a couple more anxiety disorders. Number 24 is talking about the next most common group of disorders, mood disorders. Most people think of depression when they think of mood disorders, but there's also mania. It's not as common, but it's the other end of the spectrum, the other end of the pole. We talk about mood disorders being on a pole. On one extreme, we have depression. On the other extreme, we have mania. If you experience both, we're going to call it bipolar 2 polar. It means you experience both ends of the spectrum. That's a very popular disorder right now, but let me tell you, not many people have it. So mood disorder is very common. So the major depression is one end and the mania is the other. Major depression has 9 possible symptoms. You have to have 5. And that's so that, again, 4 is not that unusual. 3 is not that unusual. It's, having 5 that we're like, that's not very common. Some of the symptoms are like affects changes in your appetite. It can be weight gain or loss, changes in your sleep. You sleep more or less than you did before. Can't concentrate, lack of energy. You feel sad, depressed, guilty. You might be irritable. It could have suicidal thoughts. So these are some examples of depression. Mania, on the other end, is extreme high, lots of energy, talk a lot, lots of ideas. You're impulsive. It's going to be noticeable. People are going to go, ooh, you want something? You are not yourself. Talking a lot, talking very fast. So it's the other end. It's the other extreme. So that's all we cover with that. It's not very much. Number 25. Unipolar depression versus bipolar or mood disorder. Unipolar and bipolar. So I guess we talked about that there in 25. Unipolar is one unicycle, one tire, one end. So most of the time you're feeling depression. So if you only get depressed and you never get high naturally, then it would be a unipolar depression. If you experience both ends of the spectrum, it can be at the same time too, which is really hard. But if you experience both ends, then we call it a bipolar depression too. Two ends of the pole. So that's all we're going to cover for chapter 14, abnormality. Sorry, I know it's not very much, but hey, at least the video was only 30 minutes. Take Abnormal Psych if you want to learn more. Bye.